Hello and welcome to the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. I am your host, the whiteologist, Mr. Blows Your Minds, and this is Black MINDZ News Report. Black MINDZ News is to report, articulate, transmit, communicate, insinuate, develop, investigate, decode, unveil, spread the news, whether by news, radio, website, or quote from publications. As I articulate this information, I said to create a universe be here, heart, soul, mind, and spirit, because why? The truth don't need no partner. As a descendant of the greatest people who created this land that we call the United States, we, the B-A-D-O-S, Black American descendant of slaves, we, today's children, offspring, and present generation, we give honor to our ancestors. You know what my motto show is? I'm never going to tell you what I heard. I'm only going to tell you what I know. Today's date is April 8th, 2020. Again, Black MINDZ News coming with another report. Well, hopefully many of you did go and watch the video that was 3 hours long. I want to apologize, but that's how much stuff had taken place, and I wanted to drop lots of tidbits in there for those people who had been lacking to know what had been taking place. Well, today's show is going to be kind of like answering some of that video due to what had already took place. So I'm going to show you, as I'm going to call today's newscast, how did we get here, Black Americans? How did coronavirus find us from Wuhan, China, across Asia, into Europe, through the United States, into the hoods of America? Well, Black MINDZ News is going to show what has been written, so stay tuned as we get into this report. Hey, how's y'all doing, everybody? Again, this is Mr. Blows Your Minds, and welcome to Black MINDZ News Report. First and foremost, I want to say what's good to the fam, my old subscribers and some new ones. I want to welcome each and every one of you new ones who just clicked on and decided you want to be part of the Black MINDZ News family. We kindly thank you for clicking and becoming one of the Black MINDZ News family. And we hope that you stay and enjoy as Black MINDZ News start to get more into what we do over here, right? So y'all not seeing that part of this. Let me make sure y'all can get that, right? So I'm going to make that straight. There we go. All right. So if you're a passerby, you happen to come by due to the simple fact you've seen the thumbnail, like the title of the video, welcome to the most hated show in the black corner of the internet. Go down the aisle. We always got a grand open to see some things that you might like. If you happen to see something to make you feel some kind of way, remember the motto of my show is the truth. No need no partner. Now, unless you've seen the entirety of video that I done for April 7th, 2020, some of the things that I'm going to talk about, display, will be kind of like me answering what you had seen. Now, if you didn't, you can still see the video, but you may have to go back to know, because the reason why I put that compilation together Because a lot of those are the pieces that how we have to ask ourselves, how we as Black Americans now being the moniker and the poster child for what they call the COVID-19 virus has a Black American face on. Let me say that again. Looks like that COVID-19, which again, if you've seen the video from yesterday, did I not show you what COVID means? COVID, for those, again, I don't want to be a spoiler to that video, but COVID in Hebrew is Kobe. Kobe like Kobe Bryant? Kobe like Kobe Bryant. What does Kobe Bryant got to do with a virus? Well, we just have to ask yourself that the person who is the head of the WHO, World Health Organization, happens to be an Eritrean Ethiopian, which pretty means he probably knows Hebrew. So the question becomes, why would he name COVID-19 COVID in reference to Kobe? Now, those who may not have known that Kobe Bryant was fighting Big Pharma, and in January he had a case that ended up going to be continued to the next hearing where they was going to decide whether the moniker nickname of Black Mamba was solely his and that the company could not. But also, if you've seen the video that I did, it gave you the news story of the individual who that was that ended up going to jail, where you've seen it talks about the 66 months. And that had a lot to do with the simple fact that what had been put out there about that pharmaceutical company and the person who ran it went to jail on the January 23rd, and on the 26th we had the news of the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianni and the other passengers, right? So again, it was 3 hours. A lot is in there, and a lot of reference that I will be making are based on that, which if you haven't seen, may not get where we're going, but that's where it is, right? So the question becomes, how can something that they say the ground zero happen in Wuhan, or Hubei, Wuhan, China, end up getting into the communities, hoods, where a lot of us reside? Now, those of you who got yourself some kind of education, got yourself some kind of job, and see that the ice is colder and the grass is greener in other places, this may not pertain to you. Right? This may not pertain to you. Now, maybe once upon a time when we were singing or telling a story, you might be able to say that, but we're talking about right here, right now. And so, you got to ask yourself, because the way that the media seems to be espousing their information, it's cutting in a way that, well, Black folks, just because of their disposition that have been in this country and the inequities, right, that has been upon them due to the history of being BADOS in this land, the racism, the disenfranchisement. So you being the offspring and present generation of that which had transpired in history, and being economically deprived are catching the blunt of what took place. And so people want to now contribute the reason why you are catching COVID-19 is because you already was sick. Right? Now, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but COVID-19 is a virus, right? And if they want you to believe that a virus is not race specific, it does not discriminate, for some odd reason, COVID-19, the coronavirus, seems to liken to black meat, right? That's what they're telling us, right? And so, with a basic general understanding, most people will assume, because I see some people saying in their writing that the great equalizer, like, well, it's not the great equalizer. Well, how do you know the origins? And for many people, when they hear conspiracy theory, you make that to sound like the wildest ass story you've ever heard, as if you have never seen a conspiracy a day in your life. I'm going to say that again. Many people try to act as if like conspiracy has to only be theory, but never can be a reality. As long as you've been in this country, have you not seen conspiracies? The problem is nobody's ever going to admit that there's a conspiracy. Then that will show the underlining to a lot of the plans and plots and schemes that people do to people unbeknownst to them. It's kind of like what the word had told you one time, talk about a spiritual war. So when you're talking about a spiritual war, you're talking about a war that somebody is fighting you that you don't even know they're fighting you. It's unbeknownst, unseen to the naked eye. But you're being attacked. And you're starting to see some of the carnage of the war. So some people may even believe that you can't, well, if there's no such thing as, if you're saying that you can have GMO, genetic modified organism, in that genetic, you have the word M, means to modify. Who modified in the GMO? Who's the one that took the seed and altered it so that it can either produce the way it wants, where you can go to the store, buy watermelon that's seedless? Now, for many of us who've been around, to see a seedless watermelon was like the craziest thing. Now, ain't no way you about to eat no sweet, watery watermelon and ain't gonna be spitting no seeds. But somehow, seedless watermelons came, seedless grapes came, seedless apples came. You get what I'm saying? So how that something that, let's say, nature, creator, that everything that is produced must replicate and come from a seed, that somehow it can manifest itself, but don't have nothing that produces so it can replicate itself. Sound like something that goes extinct. So, can there be a race-specific virus, germ? Can it be genetically modified to be race specific? Is a question you just got to ask yourself. Now, some people will try to contribute and use, because again, you got to remember, people hide behind the veil, hide behind the wall. Some of them might be also be, as in the Wizard of Oz, the eyes behind the speaker. So when you cannot fathom that as part of the reality that one is living in, and what ends up happening is you get lost in the sauce. They got your compass turned the wrong way. Now again, no one is going to say specifically that this is what it is, but you're going to have to ask yourself a question. Again, from Hubei, Wuhan, China, that goes all the way into the hoods and seems to be race specific towards Black Americans. But the thing is, many people, that part of the story is not even talked about. We just where we are right now in a pandemic. So we're going to have to trace going back to how it is believed that Black people can contract this. If it's a virus and the virus has no bias, it's not race specific, then anybody that it comes in contact, it should get them. So, let me start with this here. Let me start with this here first, right? Because, let me start with that first. Let's go there first, right? Let's go there first. And Surgeon General warns African Americans at greater risk for coronavirus. You know I'm going to say that again. Surgeon General warns African Americans at greater risk for coronavirus. This story is coming from the New York Post, April the 7th, 2020. U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams. This is how it reads. U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams had good and bad news Tuesday on the coronavirus pandemic, saying that the initial death estimates could be too high, but that African Americans were at greater risk of contracting the potentially deadly illness. I represent that legacy of growing up poor and Black in America, Adams said on CBS this morning. And I and many Black Americans are at higher risk for COVID, which is why we need everyone to do their part to slow the spread. Adams explained that Black Americans were more likely to have pre-existing conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease, and lack access to health care. In Chicago, African Americans made up 68% of the city's 118 deaths and 52% of the roughly 40% of the city's population. The Chicago Tribune reported, citing data from the Chicago Department of Public Health. Those numbers take your breath away, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot told the paper Monday. This is a call to action for all of us. Those numbers demonstrate the importance of social distancing, the Surgeon General said. Now is the time for us to really come together and say, I'm not just doing this for me and my family, I'm doing this for my community and all the communities across the country, Adams said. Adams on Tuesday also said he agreed with the director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that some research models have projected death totals that may turn out to be too high, though neither would offer an alternative estimate. The White House Coronavirus Task Force projected a death toll of 100,000 people to 240,000 people a week ago, saying that containing deaths to that range was possible if strict social distance measures were respected, implying it could go even higher. But Adams told ABC Good Morning America that he was encouraged by recent data showing a possible flattening out the outbreak in some areas. Asked if he believed the death toll would come in below the dire White House estimates, Adams said, "That's absolutely my expectation. I feel a lot more optimistic again because I'm seeing mitigation work," he said, adding that he agreed with the CDC Director Robert Redfield that deaths could fall short of total that some computer models showed. The governor of New York, New Jersey, and Louisiana pointed to the tentative signs Monday that the coronavirus outbreak may be starting to plateau, but warned against complacency. The coronavirus death toll has surpassed 10,000 in the United States, and confirmed cases have toppled 360,000. President Trump responded to the recent White House projection by saying any death toll less than 100,000 would be considered a success. Redfield said Monday that social distancing of the type ordered by nearly all states' governors was effective. If we just social distance, we will see this virus and this outbreak basically decline. And I think that's what you're seeing, Redfield said. I think you're going to see the numbers are in fact going to be much less than what would have been predicted by the models. A research model from the University of Washington, one of several cited by leading health authorities, forecasts 81,766 U.S. coronavirus fatalities by August 4th, down about 12,000 from weekend projection. The pandemic has upended daily life around the globe, killing more than 74,000 people and infecting at least 1.3 million. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said statewide deaths from the COVID-19 had leveled off around 600 per day in recent days, highest in the nation, though the numbers tick back up to 731, Cuomo said Tuesday. Behind every one of those numbers is an individual, is a family, a lot of pain again today for many New Yorkers, he said during this daily news briefing. By hospitalization, admission to intensive care units, and the number of patients put on ventilators to keep them breathing had all declined, Cuomo said. In neighboring New Jersey, the state with the second highest number of cases of death, Governor Phil Murphy said efforts to reduce the spread are starting to pay off. All right, so we are back, right? So there you go. You heard that the Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, according to the article, talks about there was some good and bad news. You know how that goes. I got some good news and I got some bad news. Which news do you want first, right? So according to Tuesday, he talked about the coronavirus pandemic and saying that the initial death estimates. Now let's think about that. Have you ever got an estimate, right? You ever went anywhere or had somebody do some work and they had the estimate? Now, can somebody be off somewhat of the price, right? Have you ever had something done? Let's say you went and got some work done in your car. Maybe you got something done at your house. Or maybe it was some shoes or some clothes or something that you purchased. And somebody asked you, and they got the same thing. And they say, well, how much you pay for that? And you be like, you tell them the price. Now, if you got beat, you know, if it was like, you'll come back, buy again, right? You know what that means, right? I beat you, right? You'll come again, buy again, right? So you got beat. And the person say, hey, man, you paid too much for that. So you got took, right? You got beat out your money, right? Right? So when you see it from that way, you just say somebody beat you out your money. They were scamming you, right? So in a pandemic, when we're talking about your estimations, may not be exact in the fact, but they have to be within the ballpark, right? For you to look like a professional or an expert on what you're talking about, don't you think that you need to have a figure that would be somewhere close within the proximity of the reality, is what I'm saying. But we see that, according to the Surgeon General, Jason here, says that that estimate that they originally put out there, right? That estimate that they were talking about, maybe some of y'all did not hear about the estimate that they talked about. They had said that the U.S. coronavirus peak predicted to see over 3,000 deaths in a single day. I'm going to say that, again, they were estimating that a daily death count of 3,000 in a single day, right? Now, who was the one that came up with that? What was the mathematical equation to give you that? And if you're so off with the numbers that you specified and stated, right? Could there be a reason why you would want to, put a bigger number out there? Because the bigger the number, the more fearful the people become, right? You put fear inside the people when it may not need to be there. And so he goes on after it's kind of like those who seen the video yesterday when I played the video of the news clip of the press conference that Lori Lightfoot had, and you seen the figures that you seen in your face, 1,824 Black Chicagoans. When you seen that, how did you feel? Did you was like, man, Black folks dying in Chicago, right? Because why would you put a stat, matter of fact, can we put that up there? Can we put that up there? I know we got a lot, but let's put that up on the screen so people can see that as it's getting that fixed, we get to put that up there, right? So when we seen that 1,824 Black Chicagoans, 847 white Chicagoans, 400, right? It went down and down, right? So let me show you, just in case you didn't see that. Let's see if I got that. We should have that. Should at least be in the thumbnail too, right? Try the thumbnail from yesterday. Should be in there, right? Oh, because all this in there, right? Okay, take those off. All right, take those off and then go in and show that, right? We would 1 second, y'all. Give me 1 quick second, and we should have this fixed right so that you can see. So it's not something me just stating. That this was actual what they presented in front of everybody's face, right? And then you have to ask yourself, if they weren't really talking about that, then what was you talking about? Come on, they showing now. Okay, now do it. Okay. I'm going to use the thumbnail from yesterday. Go ahead and do that, it's fine. So as you see on the thumbnail that I used for yesterday's show, You see in the background, you see ancestors, right? You see them on the plantation there. You got an overseer in there too, right? And you got some children and so forth. And you have the mayor of Chicago, which is Lori Lightfoot, right? And you see those numbers that they put in the video that I'm going to actually play again for those just in case who did not see, that you see 1,824 black Chicagoans, 847 white Chicagoans, 478 Hispanic, Latinx Chicagoans, 126 Asian Chicagoans, right? Now, when you see those numbers, what's coming to mind? Are you thinking that they're showing the numbers of people who are contracted as positive, or are you psychologically thinking that that is the deaths in Chicago? And then they said about 72%, right? They start talking about 72%. Okay? And so your estimates, he had to come back and he had to clean it up, because what's happening, some of us out here, we're looking at these numbers and we're saying that these numbers are not matching according to the sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, right? Now, we're not saying that it's not real. We're not saying that the virus and the COVID-19 is not real. We're saying that you're bullhorning saying black Americans are the ones that are having the bigger numbers as being contracted and dying, and not just in one place across the country. So we see Jerome Adams is trying to clean it up by saying that the initial death estimates, they could be too high. But then his second breath is that African Americans were at a greater risk of contracting the potential deadly illness. Now, again, the numbers being too high, but then now you're going to say that black Americans are going to be at a greater risk of contracting the potentially deadly illness. Now, is this virus illness, is it the same? Is it the same? Okay. So he goes in because now he's going to connect with you by telling his background that Mr. Adams here, he says that his legacy, right? So is he claiming BADOS? Is he's part of the black American descendant of slaves? And then he said that how he grew up poor in black America, and that he is represented by that same legacy of people who are poor. So I am just like you, right? I'm just like you. And he says that also that he said he is himself as I. And he said many black Americans, which is us, are at higher risk for COVID. And then again, we need everyone to do their part to slow down the spread. Now, again, they want in the minds as if like black people are not social distancing, right? I've heard on a show where somebody was probably a black show, and somebody who considered himself to be a physician and start talking about his once upon a time when he was in the black community, and the way he said that there was 8 people he knew living in a 1-bedroom apartment. Now, again, black folks from where I'm from, a 1-bedroom and 8 people in 1 bedroom today. Black people's the only people who couldn't do like other people, like Hispanics and them used to be piled up in one damn, 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. They could do it. But black folks, you cannot have a whole bunch of people in there. Let's say now if the mother has children, that would be different. But we talking about having a house full of this, all kind of people in one place. It don't work like that. We were never able to stack up our people like that and then have that money and then be able to buy a house and like some people were able to do, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about. So based on that notion that we're not following these rules that were just all out and about as if like nothing is happening. People are trying to survive. People don't have money. They don't have jobs to go to. And so when you live in paycheck to paycheck, and when you ain't got no paycheck, now you living day to day, right? So people may be traversing to and fro, trying to get the necessities, essentials, so that they can provide for themselves and those who are with them on a daily basis. So you can't just be idled when you don't have nothing. Now that doesn't condone the fact of making people going out there, but again, there has to be a cause and effect that people are traversing out there. It's not just they just not adhering to the fact that they don't believe. And we being BADOS in this land, we also know the fact that we've been lied to so much in this country about a lot of things. So a lot of times when people are saying stuff, especially when it comes from the top, we kind of understand that you don't have us in your projections if it is something to be good. Now, when it's bad, we see that we rise, cream gonna rise to the top, and we're gonna be the picture of it. But everybody knows the disparity that goes in the communities. And what would you think happen when you have a catastrophic event? The people with the least are going to be trying to survive and scramble, trying to survive. And so he tries to connect with you and tell you he's just like you and that we need to adhere to the fact that this is real. So that's what he's trying to kind of say in one sense. But then they keep saying this, they keep regurgitating this. This is like they say, you keep telling a lie long enough, you'll make people believe it. Now, is there truth in this? Yes. But we're going to have to look at, again, how did that from Hubei, Wuhan, China, cross Asia, cross Europe, into the United States, and seem to be more affecting the people in the communities that we call hoods and ghettos. So they keep saying that they want to explain to Black Americans that the reason why you're more likely, or we more likely, to contract this virus, he said illness, is that because we have pre-existing conditions. Now, such as diabetes. Now, how do you get diabetes? Is that poor diet? Or is that just the lack of access to having, let's say, when we say access, let's just say to, good sources of food. But they saturate your community with all the pollutants, the fast food restaurants, the hot Cheetos, the juice, right? The sugar, the cheap 25-cent cookies, $3, $4. You know what I'm talking about? So you have to ask yourself, so diabetes will be because due to the diet. Lack, therefore, of, let's say, places to get fresh fruit, having a balanced diet so that you're not eating so much of this high cholesterol, saturated fats, right? But everybody knows that because a lot of the people who got their business know what they're selling. And a lot of that stuff be expired food is another thing too. So they sell all this, old expired food. High blood pressure. Well, high blood pressure can be due also to the food, also the conditions, also the anxiety, also the simple fact of they're always worrying, right? Working at a job, got to walk on eggshells, right? Heart conditions. All this is all contributing to one. It's kind of like a car. Those who remember fixing on your car, one part start going bad, and the strain of that is going to make the other ones that go on bad starting to show, and they're going to start going bad after you fix that one, then the next part, and so forth and so forth. Well, that's just the same thing here, right? Say the knee bone connect to the neck bone, you know how they used to say, right? And then you want to say lack access to health care. Well, if you ain't got no job, or you got a job that don't have to pay for your health care, and if you got to, the money that you make, and somehow you got to divide that with children, rent, light, transportation, health, which one you think gonna be least? And the fact that even if you did get health care, the biasness in the healthcare system when it comes to you, which nobody, again, that would be a conspiracy, but nobody going to believe that. Then what about that part? But all these are, the way that they make this is all contributing back to you, right? Everything is about diabetes is you, heart disease is you, high blood pressure is you, lack access of healthcare is all about you. And so you see also in the article it talked about that the African Americans made up about 68% of the city. But look how they're writing this. Now see, you got to understand what they call word of art, right? The words of art that they're using here, right? Now you're going to say African Americans make up 68% of the cities, right? So some people may hear 68% of the city and thinking they're talking about the total population. But then they say 118 deaths. So what you have to do is understand the math of 118 and 68, right? So if we say half of 118 is about 59, right? 59. So that's 50% of the 118. So we're talking about somewhere between 60 under 65 people of the 118 in a city that's 2.7 million people. Black people have more according to what they said in this article, right? And that 52% of the roughly 5,000 confirmed coronavirus cases are black. Half of the 5,000, right? 52%. So we're going to say 2,500 or a little more than 2,500 of those cases of people being tested positive are black people, right? And they say basically because you are just 30% of the city's population. So, okay, you're only talking about 5,000 people. And again, we're talking about 2.7 million. Let's say it's 3 million. And we're going to say Hispanic, Asians, and blacks. Because basically white and Hispanic is the same. Everybody trying to act like they're not saying that. So let's just break it down to 3. So that's almost about 1 million each of those groups. Say 900,000, somewhere between 900,000 each group, right? And so I'm not trying to make light of the fact of 5,000 people being confirmed to be testing positive. But again, we're going to have to go in there and see them numbers according to what they say. Now, my video showed you, according to what the Johns Hopkins show of Cook County, of 209 deaths, right? And when they did the other counties included, you end up only getting about 280 deaths total. Now, again, I'm not saying 280 is just like that's something light. 280 people, if they died from the coronavirus, as they say, the COVID-19, that's tragic. If they died due to other complications on top with the COVID, that's also tragic. But that's the problem here. To me, You got two things that you're throwing at black folks and contributing to their death. When you were already sick with all these other underlying pre-existing conditions, and so throwing this on top of it, well, this was the nail in the coffin for you. So, then it talks about what Lori Lightfoot said. So again, I'm going to have to go in here and let's play what she said on that day. Let's go back in there and let's go get Lori Lightfoot's, get her interview, right? Because you must see that just in case you didn't see yesterday, right? So we ready for that? Gonna get that set up, and then let's go ahead and let's do that. And go ahead.
Today, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said the Chicago Department of Public Health statistics show, quote, 72% of Chicago's deaths have been among black Chicagoans, though black Chicagoans make up just 30% of the city's population.
Those numbers take your breath away. When we talk about equity and inclusion, they're not just nice notions. They are an imperative that we must embrace as a city. And we see this even more urgently when we look at these numbers and this disparity. It's unacceptable. No one should think that this is okay.
Joining us now is Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Lightfoot, you must have had a feeling that this was what the numbers were going to show even before the data was assembled, with this overwhelming impact on African Americans in Chicago. Do you have any working theory about why it is?
Well, I think the reporting that you just showed, which is when you have all these health disparities pre-COVID, where you've got a disproportionate number of people in the African American community with diabetes, with heart ailments, with respiratory problems. This disease attacks and feasts on those underlying conditions. And that's what we're seeing manifest in the numbers. I mean, it's breathtaking. When I first saw these numbers, I had a hard time thinking about anything else because I knew that this was going to land like a bomb and that we had to come up with some concrete, rapid responses to help people in these communities.
And there hasn't been any emphasis on this or even a word about it, as far as I know, at the White House briefings, which are the most prominent kind of public transfers of information about this. And yet we heard in the report just now that there has been a lot of misinformation
Yes.
out there. Do you have any sense of what kind of misinformation there has been in the black community?
Well, I think there's been a misinformation that black people can't actually get the virus. And the truth is, in Chicago, the first reported death was an African-American woman who then gave it to her sister, who then also died. So the numbers speak for themselves. The fact that black people are dying at 7 times the rate of any other demographic is stunning. It is a red alarm, an alert that we've got to respond to, and we are in our city.
And Mayor, how do you respond to it in terms of public information? What is the message you want to get to African Americans, and how do you deliver that message both in Chicago and beyond Chicago?
Well, what we've done is we've formed a strike force, and it's going to be hyper-local, targeted outreach to people of color, and particularly black folks, in their neighborhoods. We're going to be calling upon the faith community, elected officials, street outreach workers, people in block clubs to get the word out and then connect people up with services. We've been saying, 60 or over, we're going to lower that to 50 or over in the black community and really focus on getting people tested, getting them supports, talking to them about what they can do to protect themselves. But we've got to reach more people and quickly.
Mayor, how is the hospital system in Chicago bearing the burden so far?
Well, so far, we're okay. We've been tracking ICU numbers overall, the number of people in ICU beds that are tested positive, the number of people under investigation for coronavirus, that are in ICU beds. We've been hovering around 75, 76%. Over the last couple of days, it's dipped down to about 71%. But we know that we are far from out of the woods. We're concerned, of course, like everybody is, about ventilators, PPE, and testing. We are not testing nearly the number of people that we should be. And this is one of the tools that we're going to have to employ in thinking about how we reach Black people. We've got to bring more testing to those neighborhoods so we understand what the underlying data really is. And the last thing I'll say is we've got to make sure that our healthcare providers are providing us with the demographic information. As stark as these numbers are, we know that we're missing 20%, 25% of the demographic information on testing that's positive. So we've got to really ignite the consciousness of our healthcare providers to make sure they give us that demographic information.
All right, so we back, right? That was that press conference, right? Seeing them numbers up there and everything, right? And so you heard her talk about equity inclusion, right? Equity inclusion is talking about being fair and impartial, right? Is there such thing as fairness in this country when it comes to BADOS? Is that what our whole plight and fight has been since so-called emancipation? Civil rights? And it seemed like prior, even before the COVID or the coronavirus, that there was a unifying effect taking place. Now, I had played something in one of those interludes going into another scene. I had played should I do it again? I should do it again. See if I can put it up on here again. I played the insert from, again, for those who might have not known or never heard that before, was from the writer that they said that maybe it came from the government who said that, right? They're talking on the James River, right? They talk about plantation and the owner, right? Let me see if I got that. Let's see if I can play that right quick. Maybe I can do that for y'all. Check this out. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River in the year of our Lord, 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and still the oldest methods for controls of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sails south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish. I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its old highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the field too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasionally fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I'm not here to enumerate your problems. However, I'm here to introduce you to methods of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantations in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On the top of my list is age, but it is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There's intelligence, size, sex, size plantation, status on plantation, attitudes of owners, whether the slave lives in the valley, on the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulations, respect, or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks. But it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen.
You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart.
All right, so we're back, right? Mr. Blow Your Mind, now why would you play that? Now again, that was by William Lynch, known as the Willie Lynch letter. And the reason why I'm playing that is because we have to ask ourselves. Again, the question is, yes, a pandemic has plagued the United States. A pandemic has started from a place called Hubei, China. In Wuhan, China. That seemed to have seeped into all the crevice of the United States, corners, neighborhoods where black folks live at. The impoverished ones, the low-end ones, myself and others. So this came at a time when we look at in this country, a momentum was taking place. You had those repatriating back to Africa. We're talking about taking the economics that they gained from here, going back to Africa to help build Africa. You had that movement was going, thriving. You had those who were talking about ADOS, BADOS, FB1, right? Or FBA, B1, right? You got all that talking about black unifying, getting politically, getting on the platforms of the candidacies of the Democratic Party, making them talk about reparations, the whole nine, making candidates had to drop out because there was this threat that black supporters and people talking about, oh, they got these are Russian bots and the whole nine, right? Black people talking about building their own schools, getting their own businesses. People are taking their kids out of school, homeschooling. Black media on here, not doing from the black media and having the influence on black communities. So what happened, y'all? Oh, Willie Lynch told you how he came in 1712, right? And in 1712, he told them, he had to remind them that, Rome used to do what you're doing as I see and as I call a swift or some of these slaves that you're hanging. That's not good economics, right? But if you implement this indoctrination I'm talking about here, right? If you can indoctrinate this amongst them, this here will help you to have good efficiency amongst those who you oppress. And he said, now again, is this a real written letter? Was this propaganda? Or can you see the implementation if you sit back and look? This could be propaganda. Some say it could have been done by the CIA. Some say that it's not real. But the implications of what it talks about and the things that it speaks on, have we seen that? Do we see that? And if that was so, it talked about in this letter if a phenomenon took place, because he said that this was a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. He guaranteed that if they did this, installed it correctly, that they would be controlled for at least 300 years. So let's just say, for the news sake, if 1712 is when this was talked about and he implemented that from 1712 to 300, would take you to when? 2012. Now again, hypothetically speaking here, what we're going to talk about in a reality sense though. So if it's 2012, but we in 2020, and the things I just spoke prior to that, right? Where he talks about making the numbers of differences, right? The fear and trust. Well, there was still the element in we as black people that there's a fear for those who are not trying to do no more than what they always been, that bring a certain kind of terrorist element in the environment in the communities. And the distrust of one another due to the simple fact of what slavery has imparted in our minds. And we've seen some of the the ways that the Willie Lynch letter talks about making age a disparity, that, you know, those who are older versus those who are younger. Those who are older, look at those who are younger, you don't know the game. Those who are younger, oh man, that game, that's old. We popping now, right? Color and shade, we see that all the time. The light, bright, damn near white seems to be on a higher pedestal versus those who are dark, right? Black, they say get back, right? But we somehow been blurring those lines where that was not having the effect as it used to be at one time going back. We were blurring those lines, right? It's talking about intelligence. Now, intelligence would be how they use still to this day that I call Nebuchadnezzar. In the Bible, talk about how Nebuchadnezzar took the choicest ones amongst those who he captured, took them, changed their name, and made them be intricate parts into his system so his system could run more efficient. Well, they do it all the time. Matter of fact, if you look at the individual who was considered the Surgeon General, who said that he is of the legacy the same as you and I, but look who he works for. Look who he's using his intelligence for. And so that intelligence is seen to be amongst people as a plateau. So he has a status. And because of that status, in his mindset, he may feel he's better than. I'm not saying he does, but you can feel. And there's a lot that have, right? And so the difference on how one is big or built than another, the size of the plantation that one is on, right? Let's just say, for instance, somebody who works, let's just say at a Popeyes, versus someone who might be a chef at Cordon Bleu or Hell's Kitchen or something like that. They will work at some hot dog stand as a cook, but because you work on a plantation that's better, you seem to think that you are better. And then there's the different levels on jobs on plantations. You're a supervisor, a CEO, my assistant, and all that other stuff. Those titles make one feel grander and make a division amongst us, right? But we were starting to shave a lot of this off, right? And depending on where you live, like I said, those in the valley, that would be like those who don't live down on the low end, where they said that this COVID is permeated amongst those who are poor, lack of access to health care, and so forth and so on, right? And so he implemented this according to what he said. But then he had said something that if a phenomenon came, right? If a phenomenon would come, would be the only thing that would destroy this indoctrination. So what are you saying, Mr. Blow Your Mind? A phenomenon had sprung up, y'all. There was a phenomenon. Something like a phenomenon. Something like a phenomenon. Something like a phenomenon. That encapsulated, where it looks like the genie got out the bottle and you weren't about to put that genie back in the bottle. So guess what they end up had to do? They had to reset the game. I'm going to say that again. The game had to be reset. Niggas got out of place. Niggas did not want to be the niggas that they want you to be. You were trying to be successful. You're trying to be building business. You want to try to compete with me. You want to, matter of fact, you want to take away from me from those things that I could be relying on. These became, easy money for me to get. You were going to take that away, and then I start talking about building your communities and building businesses and start creating your own products. That was not good economics. So somebody decided to break the glass because it was an emergency. Well, we're not going to come at you because, see, then that would make a lot of the people in that black corner who be talking those things and saying that they're going to come at you because going back to Oklahoma, when they bomb, every time you build, they come and do it. So they didn't want to go that way. So what they did is it came with another way. Yeah, that's right. Ding. That was a bell. Ding. That bell ringing. There's a light coming on. Huh? Now again, is that conspiracy theory talk? Yes, it's conspiracy theory talk. But again, USB DOS in this land. Has it never been a conspiracy against you? Is anybody going to ever say directly? I mean, look how they did with the Martin Luther King trial. It happened. It took place. A verdict was given, but if you didn't read it and know about it, you wouldn't know. So ask yourself, was that a conspiracy? Was that real? So anyway, right? So let me go back into that because I just wanted to bring that because, again, people got to understand, right? What are you doing, sir? You know they can hear you doing that, right? All right, him crazy. So, hey man, you got all kind of sirens and things going off over there. Get back to the show, all right? The dock your payment, man. They ain't probably hearing all that, right? Just do what you do over here. Anyway, all right. So. Here she was saying the things she said, right? And size of the plantation. Now, you know all these people that be in these positions and get in there, you're just nothing like Nebuchadnezzar. You're just intricate parts that's going to help facilitate what they're doing. A lot of us really think that we can put somebody into the old boys network and the way it runs and think that somehow you're going to change it. It was designed and built for what it's designed to do. And so she sat there, and actually gonna co-sign the stuff. But I want y'all to see this because I went and did this research here on that what she just spoke about, right? And then I want you to see afterwards. I'll do that after that, Frank. Okay, we'll go back there. Okay. Let's go ahead and play this, and then we'll be back, and I'll talk more about what I was going to say. All right. So I didn't go ahead and explain before I go ahead and go into that. Now, remember when Lori Lightfoot talked about the 72% and the 30%. Now that 72% that she's talking about, again, when they use the 30%, they're making you think that 72% is talking about the 30% of the population. So again, if they said 2.7 million residents in the city of Chicago, and you said 72% of the black population, that would be catastrophic, right? Think about that. Would be catastrophic. But that number 72 was representing that 81842, which is 1,842 black people who were contracted with the coronavirus. But again, if I'm talking about 900,000 residents, not making light that 5,000 people or 1,842 people is not significant in any shape or fashion, but trying to bring a hysteria when actually the 72% was not even right. And that was the other thing. Because the 1,824 was talking about out of 3,275. So if you did the math for 1,824 and divide that to the 3,275, you're going to get about 55, 56%. See? So you went 16% more than what the actual number was. So you're creating a hysteria in black folks in Chicago that this mass rampant virus is eating and contracting black people. Not they're saying that 56 and 55 is not, but that was just only the numbers that you had according to the entire city had 3,275 according to the data from the Chicago Health records that was online. And then the very next day, she came out and said it was 50%. But why would you state that originally anyway? And why is it so important to make our people feel like, you know, the boogeyman, Baba Yaga, is coming to eat you? Matter of fact, she even said that this virus is feasting on the preconditions. And that in itself, she might have just been speaking, either coming from her heart or slipped on a banana peel. But feasting on the preconditions, going back to when I originally talked about, when talking about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. The word modify means that somebody is altering. If you've been reading and know about certain things about when it comes to science and biochemical warfare, modifying to make resin and SARS, all those biological weapons were specified, and then the advancement of science where it turned into you can make it race-based, ethnic-based, because it would be the same things when you look at something like AIDS. That it seems that certain diseases seem to only stigmatize certain ethnicities and race, as if not everybody's not doing the do, as if these particular people here are not doing the same thing as these people are doing. But somehow they're not contracting it. And so it may sound like it could be conspiratorial talk, but you just have to look at it for what it is. And that she also talked about that in Chicago, the first death of the coronavirus was a black woman. But I'm going to show you later on that you're going to see a person that came from Chicago who were one of the original carriers that was documented that a lot of people don't know. And I don't know if that person who's going to be talked about is the person she just spoke about. But again, the poster for being the first death was a black person. Just like when you see the first person who died as a cop was a black person, right? It seemed like everybody that they kept propagating on TV seemed to make sure that it had to be a black person. And some people are now writing and saying, why are we making this racialized? Why are we racializing? Well, it's because we as BADOS in this land and the history, and when we look at the AMA and the history of how it used our ancestors to create an experiment. Matter of fact, even in the prisons, right? A book I read called Acres of Skin. Well, when you go and you don't have money on the books that you can sign up for experiments, and they using these things like guinea pigs in order for you to get some money on the book, but then you're going through the trial and errors of whatever products, experiment that they're doing. And so, again, she heightens it by saying 7 times the rate of any other ethnicity demographic group in the city. But the numbers that you're stating are not facts. They were inflated. And matter of fact, they even talking today, as I'm doing this video, they're talking about, as you heard, the Surgeon General said there was the conflation in the numbers. There was a lot of conflating in these numbers. So you have to ask yourself, why are people sensationalizing something and just going with the facts? Why are you conflating it and trying to make hysteria? Because it has to be an agenda behind it, right? So, based on the simple fact that we have the things that you heard the mayor of Chicago spoke on as the concern she felt about black people. She didn't include herself. She made it seem like it's separate. She didn't include herself, but black people, right? Then that was done on, I think, the 6th, and then I think the morning of the 7th, which means that wasn't even 24 hours later, this is what took place. Check this out, and I'll be back. Go ahead. All right, so what you have here is from the city of Chicago. It is the database according to, it looks like the health department, right? As you can see on your screen, and I'm hoping that you can see it clearly, it has the latest update of April 7, 2020. And it says there have been 5,511 cases of COVID-19 identified in Chicago residents so far, and 13,549 in Illinois. As this outbreak spreads globally, CDPH is tracking it closely and using data to guide its response, right? So that's what it says in the highlighted blue area. So what I want to show you is these numbers. It says COVID-19 morbidity, right? Morbidity, right? I had it right. And mortality by geography. Now, they're breaking this down to the location, right? Chicago is the city. Illinois would be the state. They talk about U.S. as the country, and then they talk about the planet, the world, right? Now you see it says Chicago has 5,511 cases. It says 140 deaths. Right? What? Right there, you ought to be like, wait a minute, hold on. Then yesterday, Mr. Blows Your Mind, you showed a video, because I didn't actually talk, The reason why I did what I did yesterday is because from this point forward, anybody who watched the totality of that last video that I did, I know it was 3 hours, but it was a lot of events during that particular time. And so I want to make sure that you've seen what I've seen, so that when I make reference to it, those who will see the video in its entirety will know what I'm talking about. Okay, because it was more of a, listen visual more than me giving a dissertation. So let me show you something right quick. As to remember, they showed the numbers of the COVID-19 cases by race. Now this statistic is coming out of the news conference that you've seen the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, specify that this here, what you've seen here, 1,824 black Chicagoans, 847 white Chicagoans, 478 Hispanic, Latinx Chicagoans, and 126 Asian Chicagoans, right? Now, this was the number they were showing of deaths, right? Was it the deaths or was it those who were contracted or those who came up positive? So when they threw this number at everybody, saying 1,824 people, and then threw the number of 72%, right? They threw 72% out at the people. When we go in, and I also showed, matter of fact, remember I also went into the COVID-19, the Johns Hopkins, and we went through what it had statistically for the data numbers. Remember, Chicago, Cook would be Chicago. Chicago would be Chicago. It had 209, and then was DuPage, and it was Will County, it was Lake County, right? And it was 15, 19, and 22. And when they did the total math, it was 280. Remember that? 280. That was the number that I had based off what the Johns Hopkins data displayed that we all seen. So based on the simple fact that it seemed like they split it from the Johns Hopkins numbers, that they end up now saying that they are going to tabulate. So I guess it's separating federal from state. So it ended up going into the hands of the health department. And so this is what you see here. You're seeing the numbers that they have. Now, these are supposed to be the actual factual numbers. As I said, they said there's 5,511 cases in a city that is counted up 2.7 million residents. I'm going to say that again. 2.7 million plus residents in Chicago. And then you say 140 deaths. Now, again, I'm not here to say that anybody who has died from is stated as the COVID-19 coronavirus, that we shy them off as if they have no significance, that life has no meaning. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm trying to figure out what they're stating and the severity that they're pumping into black people's mind seem to not correlate with the numbers. And so the question or the red flag in your mind need to be, why do they feel like they need to, bombard our minds with the fear of us contracting and dying? Then my other question becomes, if somebody is considered positive for COVID-19 but has no symptoms, what they call it, symptom asymptomatic or not Semitic, asymptoms, right? Or asymptomatic. So if you are a person who can have the virus but show no symptoms, so that means, I guess, in the mind that we have to think that you become a carrier, because each individual, according to the way this virus works, seems to only, it doesn't matter if you come in contact, it's going to have a different effect on everybody. So the question becomes, why would you put out that number and then say that there's only 140 deaths for a city that is 2.7 million people who on the regular, let's just say every day, week, month, 3 months, 6 months, yearly, how many deaths do the city average when we're not talking about just a pandemic? So we have to look at this. And we can't just take this lightly because, again, there's some people who seen the video and were able to discern the underlying of the information that was put together and understand that that is the agenda that someone is laying, that it seems, I'm going to say it seems, that the target is to make sure that you and I are vaccinated. And so let's look at some more of the statistics here. Now, no, go back to that one there. All right, so let's look at some more of this here. So it goes into COVID-19 characteristics of Chicago residents. It talks about age. There's between 0 and 17. They said there had been 57 cases of positive. There's been, I guess there have been no deaths, right? They're not showing any deaths. They're just showing a percentage, 1% in the city of Chicago, 10.4 per 100,000, right? So basically, it looks like the higher number of people who are contracting the COVID-19 in Chicago, pretty much it seems like once you get up to 18 years old all the way through to 70, you know, the numbers are pretty much steady, right? From 18 to 70. Because from 18 to 29, you got about 755 cases, 30 to 39. 955 cases, 40 to 49, you got 1,017. From 50 to 59, you got 1,058. From 60 to 69, you got 870 plus, you got 864. And then you have something about unknown. I don't know how, I mean, what is that, babies? Would that be under 0? That would be people who would already be pregnant. I don't know how you, but anyway. So, goes into gender. It talks about females, 2,655 females, and males at 2,800, between 48 to 50%. And then when it breaks it down to race and ethnicity, right? Now this is race ethnicity 2, right? So I guess we have to go, what is 1 then? 1 would be over here to your left, bottom left. Now, according to that, on this race ethnicity, the original one, it said Latinx, right? It says contracted, you got 14, right? Black non-Latinx, you got 95. White non-Latinx, you got 19. Asians 3. Other non-Latinx 2, and unknown 7, right? Okay. So go back to race ethnicity number 2. Now you have Latinx have 603 cases, and Black non-Latinx is 2,102. White non-Latinx is 941. Asian non-Latinx is 150. And then you have other non-Latinx 265. But you have an unknown. What can be unknown? 1,450. It's 26%. What is considered unknown? What do you mean unknown? They're not classified as a race? Are they not from this world? You don't have a classification for them? So what can be contracting 1,450 but don't fit in any of the groups of Latinx, Black, White, Asian? Then what group do you fall under, right? And another question would be, of the 2,102, since we're going to say Black Americans, and when people say Black Americans, only when people who are trying to either be applicants for something that has to specify and check the box when they want to be beneficial for it, they don't have a problem clicking on the Black American box. But when we want to be specific and try to make the poster child of a Black person, then we are whatever geographical location we come from and what our flag that we wave, then we're that. So when it comes negative and bad, oh, that's them. But I'm saying if 2,102 people are being considered black non-Latinx, could those blacks be people who would be considered foreign blacks? Does it necessarily have to be stigmatized that black Americans, and when we say black Americans, we're talking about BADOS, black American descendants of slaves. So when you use the stigma of saying that, let's say, hypertension, obesity, when you start using all these terms, do those terms fall with foreign blacks? I'm going to say that again. When they use the term black Americans, is it specified as black American, BADOS, as I say over here, black American descendant of slave, or does that encompass anything that has melanin, that has a ancestry that goes back to Africa? And we know that when it becomes negative and stigmatized, being black, those who would be considered under the umbrella of black seem to draw their flag and have a distinction. So what I'm saying is, when you say 2,102, is that black Americans, or are that including people who would be immigrants to this land, who would be considered black? And when you use those terms of obesity and high blood and hypertension, that seems to be stigmatized towards black Americans, not black foreigners. So if we're going to be the poster, then make these numbers specific so that we can see the real number, instead of just trying to umbrella and then stigmatize us and then put it in the paper, and then other people get to jump off like they talking about them and not us. Okay? So that's something else they're going to have to be a little bit more clearly when they starting to show these numbers here. Because you also have, and maybe this unknown that they're talking about, is that the fact that Chicago is a sanctuary, it might be the only sanctuary city in the United States. Let me say that again. Chicago might be considered the only sanctuary city in the United States. So when you have an unknown classification of people who you got at 1,450, right? Would this be those of the sanctuary cities? Right? Because let me show you a video that's going to show after the day when they showed this stat here. When you seen that conference with Lori Lightfoot saying what she said, not even 24 hours later, she came with an executive order giving funds to maybe of this unknown, which I'm going to say I believe it to be, but they have not specified. But who else could be a group of that number of people a number of people who are being considered positive, but you don't have a classification for them to fall under? So I would bet my money that has to be the sanctuary city numbers. And if that be the case, that 1,450 of them have been contracted, then we have to say, where is these sanctuary cities at? Are they within the areas of the people who you say they got 2,102? Because another thing has to be said. Thing has to be said is, when they say that black people are contracting the COVID more than anybody else, right? We're going to just say in Chicago, but we can go to each state, especially the cities that have a high population of black Americans. What is it that they're not stating that shows that black Americans Matter of fact, let me do this here. Let me go back here. Let me show y'all something here. Let me see if I can show this here. Let me show you something here. Let me see if I can show this here. My stuff seems a little dragging. But what I want to say is, what the hell are they talking about? What? That ain't, no. Go back to what I want. What you trying to do here? What's this all about? Hold on, let me go back over here and let me get that fixed. For some odd reason, it's trying to do something else. Okay. Because what I want to do is I want to go back to, let me see if I can go back to the home page here. Let's see if I can go back to the home page. Because I want to show, they're showing a map, right? They're showing the map of the city of Chicago, and they're showing the areas and zip codes where predominantly where the positive cases are showing, and they have numbers, right? And another thing I want to specify too about the sanctuary cities. I'm saying that there's a possibility that because of those, again, if you are avid watchers of the Black MINDZ News, you remember when I did the report about the date of, I think it was February 24th, I think it was, right? Of 2020. Do anybody remember when I did the report about February 24th of 2020? And I talked about an article. I read an article, I gave you some video on it, and then I talked about it. And it was talking about the public charge. Remember that? Public charge. And remember that Trump had put in, I think it's legislation they put in that was going to now relinquish the immigrants who were getting public funding from the country, that if they, again, somebody say hold their own nuts, if they couldn't hold your own nuts, then guess what? You would either be deported or you better find some employment, right? And then there was a deadline because, matter of fact, the Supreme Court had backed them, allowing that it could go into effect. And so February 24th was the deadline. But guess what? Because Chicago is considered a sanctuary city, how many people who are immigrants from around the nation hustle and bustle and got themselves into Chicago so that they didn't have to be, penalized for the public charge bill. So then we have to ask yourself, then when Lori Lightfoot, the day after putting the numbers that showed these stats here, came and had a news conference and stated that she had money of, I think it was, it was $2 million. Again, I'll play the clip and you'll hear again if I didn't already play it. So then I have to say that this mysterious number here of unknown has to be that group of 1,450. So that means, how are these people contracting? And that was, as a matter of fact, before I got derailed, I didn't really get derailed, but I just kind of went somewhere. But getting back on track, the question becomes, people want to say and keep reporting from the general media and sensationalize the fact that black people are dying, black people are contracting and becoming positive more than anybody else. But what is the connecting factor that why black people would be COVID-19 positive carriers and becoming sick? I'm going to say that let's look at it from We being BADOS in this land. The old saying is, when white folks catch a cold, black people catch pneumonia. Do I need to say that again? White folks catch a cold, black folks catch pneumonia. So when the pandemic hit the United States, and when we talk about the disparity, because matter of fact, even Lori Lightfoot made that this is now make no sense, because the underlying contributing factor why black people with hypertension and diabetes is due to economics. And because we are the descendants of slaves and no one has never dealt with remedy for the years of free labor, and then set a people free, and then have all these stigmatizations and obstacles to not allowing them to be full participants of what you say is on the writing on the wall. Then when a catastrophe, a pandemic happens, and the years of neglect, the years of being disenfranchised will show its face, and then somehow they're trying to turn the issue to be it's your own fault, right? And so I'm saying that black people during the pandemic, because of their economic situations, now I'm not going to say the black people who, whether you got a position or you got business and you have, money and savings in the bank. We're talking about people who have to work day to day, who live paycheck to paycheck. When a catastrophe happens, pandemic as we're going through, and they can't work. And if you do work, you're working as they consider essential, right? You're at high risk. Black folks have to work in high risk situations to stay surviving. I'm going to say that again. The underlying part that no one wants to talk about, that it seems that when you go from state to state and they keep trying to show black folks, because you got to ask yourself, how do black folks get that something that happened in Wuhan that end up getting in Europe, that end up coming here? And I know how, according to the story that they gave and they wrote, that you brought those evacuees that were part of the government into this country. You did not go through the whole incubation period and allow them to go back home with their families, and that began the spread of the COVID-19. Then as January started, you start having the cases, but because of the Kobe Bryant's death, it blocked a lot of that being brought to the attention of the American public. And so, mum's the word, and if it finally gets to a situation, then we will get, and then once by March, it became where now, how long you allow the people, and again, remember I read in Wuhan, remember there was 230,000 volunteers, 10,000 athletes, right? And I know that's October the 19th to the 27th, but how many of them stayed still in Wuhan? Because again, I heard on a particular show where a woman who was a nurse, and she was talking about that even in November, they was having people coming in who were testing positive, and they was dealing with the COVID even long before here we is in March and April. So I have to say again, according to the Wuhan games, that remember that they said that they believe they brought it. But also, did I not show you a video that a lot of people, again, who have short memories, Remember that we had a flu epidemic in this country leading up to January, the first week of January, where it talked about 9 point something, almost 10 million people had flu or had contracted the flu, and 4,800 people had died. And soon as that, and then you got this coming. So, coincidence? I don't believe in this, no coincidence, right? So black people in this pandemic are the ones who are working these jobs, working at the airports, working at the hotels, working at the restaurants, at the grocery stores, right? And we're talking about Chicago. You don't have employment in these areas where these people are residing at. They have to leave their communities to go into the areas that are designated where the business districts and employments are. And so they're coming in contact, in Chicago being a political and business city. And the people who seem to be more contracted with this in the beginning were government people. Then there was people who had been there who would come in contact and came here and so forth. And so, but again, how can black folks who are nowhere close by the proximity of these people, but you're just going to say virus and it can only get to you, but you the furthest thing from them, because other than the fact that it has to be through your work. And here it is, black folks, through the pandemic, a lot of people were forced to go to work because they could not stop working because the bills are going to come. The rent is due. You understand? So the sacrifice had to be made. So I just read the other day that is now talking about those who work in the essential business through the pandemic. Now they're talking about they want to give you $25,000. Your employer can apply for the money, and that way they're going to give you the money. But if you don't hear this information that I just told you, guess who's going to keep that money? So again, the question becomes, black people get it due to maybe fact of their jobs, but then you have an unknown people who sit amongst you that you don't know. Maybe they contracted. Maybe these people who are not accounted for, who might be working and, Underground Railroad, and where are these places that they call sanctuary cities? Are they nickel and dime amongst you? And they carriers? And you didn't know? Possibly. Anything possible. But to say that you're contracting it more than anybody else, then what are the contributing factors? Oh, because you got poor health. Really? But the numbers that you spew compared to what you show don't match. So why are you trying to stigmatize the minds and hearts and spirits of our people if it's not having an agenda?
New at 11, a major announcement from Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot reaching out to the city's immigrants and refugees in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic. CBS 2's Eric Cox explains the mayor's executive order and what it means for non-U.S. citizens.
We're all in this together. That was the mayor's main message this morning here inside City Hall as she signed an official decree securing and supporting immigrants and refugee communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mayor Lori Lightfoot putting her pen to paper and officially signing the executive order a little over an hour ago. While the coronavirus continues to present challenges to Chicagoans, the mayor says she wants anything and everything provided as disaster relief to the city's American citizens to also extend to others who call Chicago home.
We are all in this together is not just a nice sentiment.
It is an imperative for who we are and who we will remain as a city.
And the mayor's office says that because non-U.S. citizens can't apply for federal or state assistance, the city will be establishing a housing assistance grant program, online learning resources through Chicago Public Schools, and a $100 million small business resiliency fund. We're outside City Hall this morning. Eric Cox, CBS 2 News.
Start with some statistics. Immigration-related arrests are up 38% under President Trump, but deportations were actually higher during the first 4 months of last year when President Trump was still in office. And I don't remember you complaining about deportations when the Democrats were in charge. So why now?
Yeah, I think you meant President Obama, but that said, what the whole purpose here is because the kids that go to our schools, the dreamers, all the kids, we have 140 languages spoken in our schools. Those kids and their families are frightened. And it's incumbent as a city, whether you're from Ireland or India, Poland or Pakistan, Mexico or Moldova, where my grandfather came from, those children are part of the Chicago family. And their parents are working incredibly hard. They sacrifice, they struggle, so their kids could not only come to a place called America, but specifically Chicago. And I think Chicago will always represent the promise of America. If you believe that tomorrow can be better than today, you are welcomed here. And I want those families to know and their children to know that if you believe in America and you believe in tomorrow, which is what we always believe here, you are welcomed. And it's not just being a sanctuary city, it's being a welcoming city that it was to my grandfather 100 years ago when he came to Chicago, fleeing the pogroms of Eastern Europe, and he was only 13 years old. That is not only our past. If you look to the future, immigrants are a vibrant part of that future, and I want them to feel welcomed here because it is who we are as a city. It is everything that has built the city, out of many, one.
The Supreme Court has lifted a nationwide injunction against a sweeping policy targeting low-income immigrants. In a 5-4 ruling, the court approved the Trump administration's so-called public charge rule.
The regulation was unveiled in August. It gives officials more power to deny visas and green card applications from immigrants who the government determined rely or could rely on certain public benefits. All right, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. He's joining us now from Washington with more. Camilo, explain to our viewers the origins of the term public charge and what kind of impact this ruling will have on immigrants.
Yes, good morning. The term public charge first became part of U.S. immigration law in 1882, a long time ago. This was a period in U.S. history when the government made concerted efforts to limit immigration from non-white countries and to give preference, really, to immigrants from Western Europe. That same year, the U.S. began implementing the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act, which effectively barred most Chinese immigrants from entering the U.S. For decades now, the U.S. has asked most green card and visa applicants to prove they won't be a public charge or an economic burden on the country. But this sweeping regulation that the Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration to implement yesterday would dramatically expand the definition of this term, giving officials more power to deny green cards and visas to immigrants and prospective immigrants whom the government determines rely or could rely on public benefits. And the key issue here, Anne-Marie and Vlad, is that determination about future benefit use. Most immigrants who are not green card holders or who do not have U.S. citizenship are ineligible for most public benefits. So the rule disproportionately affects those who are seeking to immigrate here abroad. To determine if these would-be immigrants are likely to become a public charge here in the U.S., officials will consider their age, wealth, educational skills, English language proficiency, and their health. This is why advocates believe the policy will effectively revive an immigration system based on a wealth test that is expected to disproportionately block the entry of poor and working class people from Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and Asia.
So if most immigrants are not eligible for any of these social programs anyway, and I think statistically what we find is that immigrants typically, compared to American-born people, do not rely on these sort of programs. What is the Trump administration saying is the reason for this?
Yeah, administration officials and immigration hawks have strongly defended this rule, arguing that it will promote quote-unquote self-sufficiency and self-reliance among immigrant communities here in the U.S. You may remember that Ken Cuccinelli, one of President's top officials at the Department of Homeland Security, even offered an alternative line to the new Colossus poem inside the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty to advocate for this rule. He changed the words of the poem from "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free" to "Give me your tired, your poor, who can stand on their own 2 feet and who will not become a public charge."
So lower courts are still dealing with multiple legal challenges against the public charge. Where do the challenges stand after the Supreme Court's ruling?
Yes, so after the regulation was issued in August of last year, it was quickly held up in court by 5 injunctions. There were 4 nationwide injunctions. The Supreme Court yesterday lifted the last remaining nationwide injunction by a judge in New York. So there is only one statewide injunction in Illinois, meaning that the administration will now have the power to implement the policy across the entire country except in Illinois. The 5 cases will be argued on their merits in the coming weeks and months, and the Supreme Court may have to intervene again on behalf of the administration. But Vlad and Anne-Marie, this is still a major victory for the administration on one of its signature issues.
So I want to ask you about something else. Last Friday, Acting Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli previewed an expansion of a series of controversial policies that would change the country's asylum system at the southern border. Tell us more about that.
Yes, so these were very important announcements by Mr. Cuccinelli. The administration, as you both know, has already dramatically restricted access to the asylum system at the U.S.-Mexico border, but these moves will further limit that access and leave asylum seekers at the border with very few options to seek protection. In the coming weeks, the Trump administration will expand 2 programs designed to fast-track the deportation of asylum seekers. The programs have already drawn criticism from advocates because migrants subject to them have very limited access to lawyers, and they have to fight their deportation orders in a matter of days while detained in secure Customs and Border Protection facilities. Cuccinelli also said that the U.S. could soon start implementing its asylum agreement with Honduras in the coming days. As you may remember, this is one of 3 agreements the U.S. brokered last year that allow officials to deny certain asylum seekers access to our asylum system and require them to choose between seeking protection in the receiving country or returning home. So far, only the deal with Guatemala has been implemented so far, with the U.S. deporting roughly 268 asylum seekers from El Salvador and Honduras there as of yesterday, including 94 children and dozens of families, according to figures provided to us by Guatemalan officials.
All right, Camilo, thank you very much for your reporting as always.
Thanks so much.
All right, so before I go into the last part, it was something I thought I should have added into this video, right? And the part that I want to add in here, because I didn't add it, but I'm going to do it now, there's another dynamic, because again, when we think about the hood, and again, the numbers. And again, I'm not saying that people who died, people who did not contract COVID-19, but the question had to become, how did the coronavirus COVID-19 break, if we was talking like a computer, like your firewall, right? And so how does something break in your, get past your security system when Black communities are isolated away from pretty much everybody else, unless those who fit the criterion of being destitute and low income, then you may mix amongst. But other than that, that's not the normal prescription, right? Then I also forgot to add this part in here before I go into giving you the history of the COVID, right? And then where we are now. I'm looking for that right now. Let's see, where is that at? Because I think this is an important part that plays into breaking the wall, getting inside. And I'm going to play this and the contributing factor that we must look at, because again, they started to release the inmates, let's say like Cook County Jail, right? And so Cook County Jail, those who had, we'll say, non-criminal offenses like child support and things of that nature. And so, tickets, or it could have been, a lot of things that were not considered to be high crime. Matter of fact, I think even R. Kelly tried, and the judge had announced and said he couldn't as well. So what part did this also play as into bringing into the community, heightening up and getting those numbers? And the people who are part of the numbers of the count, are they also part of the inmates? So let me show you this to validate the point that I'm making. And then after this, we'll get into the last part, which is how, according to what the history of how that whole coronavirus started, the question becomes, how did it get into our hoods, right? So check this out and be right
Good
back.
afternoon. Cook County's public defender says desperate times call for desperate measures, arguing that this crisis is putting inmates at risk. Amy Campanelli said that she wanted a mass release. She wanted several hundred of these inmates all released at one time. Judge Leroy Martin, who is the presiding judge of the criminal division, gave Campanelli most of the things she wanted. Campanelli told Judge Martin jails are confined spaces, have poor ventilation, and inmates are restricted in their movements. To keep them incarcerated is unjust. Campanelli said, like a cruise ship or a nursing home, when the virus gains a foothold, it will spread like a wildfire. Right now, there are 5,600 inmates in the jail. The public defender says there are hundreds charged with nonviolent offenses who have underlying health conditions, pregnant inmates, and those who are jailed simply because they cannot afford bail. Well, this is what Judge Martin decided to do. Tuesday to Friday, teams of judges will look at cases brought to them by the public defender and the state's attorney's office. The judges will decide if an inmate is a danger to the community. If not, whether that inmate should be released. Last week, 100 inmates were released.
These are brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, children. They should not be locked up because it's certainly because of the crisis, but certainly because they don't need to be locked up. They don't need to be behind the walls. It took us 8 days to get 100 people out. That's too slow. That's not enough. We need 400 or 500 people a day getting released from the jail until we can depopulate the jail.
Before this morning's court hearing, a group of church leaders held a prayer vigil outside the jail. The group wanted to show support for a mass release. Now, another concern for the Cook County Public Defender is that a correctional officer here at the jail tested positive for COVID-19. The officer last worked at Cermak Hospital and the jail's residential treatment unit. The public defender, Amy Campanelli, says that she thinks up to 2,000 inmates could be released. At 26 in Cal, Judy Wang, WGN News.
All right, so now what I'm going to show, based on the premise that I'm setting or have set, hopefully it's clear to many of you. Question becomes, how do a virus that starts in Hubei, Wuhan, China, goes through Asia, Europe, across the Caribbeans and into the United States, and seems to attack Black Americans who are considered of the poor of this country, what we would call the hoods, the low ends. And everybody keeps contributing, or, well, they say the contributing factors, the underlying conditions pre-existing before there was a virus or illness. And maybe this hasn't been a question that many people even thought about. So I want to present this to give a history. Maybe you can see the picture a little bit better. Now, this here that I'm about to show you is going to be the collection of articles of the time when all this was taking place that I was reading, that I saved, not knowing that eventually I was going to be making a video that they would come in handy. A lot of times when I'm reading things, I am saving a lot of stuff due to the simple fact that because I'm constantly doing videos, I want to continue to keep doing videos because a lot of times some things are prohibiting me from doing it. But I wanted to show you just in case you didn't know. Because everybody seems to go from Hubei, Wuhan. Then we are now in America with the pandemic, and the news that is being bombarded in the minds is that Black Americans have the higher propensity of being carriers and dying from a disease that once you see how this got here, the question still becomes, how did it get in the hoods? How did it get in the hoods? So let's look at this. So I'm going to show you this here, and it says that the first coronavirus case in the United States, I got it underlined here, under the United States was confirmed on what? January 21st, 2020, okay? In Washington State, right? In Washington State. The patient had traveled to Wuhan, China. By March 18th, there was a confirmed case in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. I'm going to say that again. The first known case in the United States that was confirmed, which they call patient zero, was on January 21st, 2020, right? And this person resided in Washington State. Again, it says that the patient had traveled. It's known that he or she went to Wuhan, China. Then they go in that they said from January 21st, which would be almost 2 months later, by March 18th, according to what this state here, there was a confirmed case in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So it had already in 2 months, from January 21st, there had been a case in every state. Okay? And so it says states have implemented different social distancing requirements with varying levels of enforceability. By afternoon of March 14th, 14 states. Okay? I'm talking about March 14th. Now, what day are we on right now on this social distancing? Think about that. It says the District of Columbia and at least 7 major cities or counties had implemented bans on gathering, with an additional 19 states recommending the cancellation of large events. Following days and weeks, other states, cities, and counties strengthened and implemented additional measures. Now, again, keep in mind, this began, according to as being stated here, the first confirmed case starts January 21st. Okay? And so, let's look at this here. Now, this stuff that I'm getting here, I got it directly from the State Department's official site when they had originally got the press conference that a lot of people probably did not know. But we as Black News, again, as I am a reader of news on the daily, looking for, topics and things that I think that are necessary for Black Minds News to disseminate. So I was on top of it, but maybe I didn't do anything, and maybe because nobody heard me, don't know that what I was doing. So here states here, let me show you here, says that the senior State Department official won, and this was the press conference. It would be kind of considered the transcript. And it says, good afternoon, everybody. Senior State Department official won here. The COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented global challenge, one that has affected a great number of Americans abroad. Okay? They're not talking about at this point. They're talking about abroad. They're not talking about in the United States. They're talking about abroad, those who are Americans who are abroad. Here at the Department of State, we're rising to meet that challenge. We're working around the clock to bring United States citizens who are stranded overseas back home. Okay? This is the press conference. Our consular officers posted overseas are local. Their local employees, colleagues have been working night and day to help Americans get on flights. And as moderators, too, just said, there's a 24/7 task force here in Washington supporting that effort. Okay? So this press conference that they're having, they're getting in preparations to bring back those who are abroad, who are known citizens, and primarily seems to be people who are associated as employees and family members is their concern. It says, though we stood up the task force last week, this was not our first effort to bring Americans home in response to the pandemic. Okay, so now, last week, from the time of this press conference, this wasn't their first effort to bring Americans home. Now remember that the date that originally going to be stated for the outbreak in Hubei, Wuhan is December 31st. So we're talking about now in January. So we're already talking about over a month, okay? It says we evacuated over 800 people from Wuhan and over 300 from Diamond Princess in Japan. In total to date, we have brought home more than 5,000 Americans from 17 countries, okay? Here's these numbers, 5,000. And we're bringing home thousands with S, more in the coming days and weeks. So, again, for those who might have seen the video that I did, that now they have banned that video, that it only can be played in the United States. It cannot be played outside of the United States. So just a matter of time that eventually they're probably going to shut the whole video down. But if you've seen it, you've seen it. Right? And so they say this is truly an unprecedented effort to bring Americans from every region of the world in these rapid changing conditions on the ground. Okay? So we would assume, based on what is being stated here, that they only got 800 people that were in Wuhan, right? China. So I'm going to go in and show you other parts that had been talked about as into the actual numbers, the evacuees, who they brought in, so on and so forth. So that there came from the State Department of their press conference. Then these here will be the reports that came out of articles during the time that reports are being made as into the general population knew nothing about what was going on, but there were stories that had been circulating. So let me show you this. And it says here, as I got highlighted in the red box, that on Friday, a woman in her 60s in Chicago was confirmed to have the virus. Okay? Now, you heard Lori Lightfoot say that in Chicago, the first person who was confirmed to have died from the virus was a black woman, right? That who gave to her sister who also died. Now, is this the same woman they're talking about? Is this a black woman? Okay. That they're talking about in this article, or is this somebody else entirely different? Okay. Then it says on, again, I said it again, on Friday, a woman in her 60s in Chicago was confirmed to have the virus. On Tuesday, authorities confirmed a man in his 30s in Seattle had been sickened by novel coronavirus. Then on Sunday, the CDC confirmed a case in Maricopa County, Arizona. Like the Southern California cases, all three had been in Wuhan. Now, we have a person in Chicago, we have a person in Seattle, we have another person in Arizona, and they're also talking about Southern California. Okay? In the red box I have on the second part highlighted, it says at least 36 cases of coronavirus have been confirmed outside of China. Okay? There's only 36, including in France, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, Nepal, Hong Kong, and Australia. Now, again, question becomes, we understand that an outbreak is happening, but should these people been allowed to come into the country so that they could be potential carriers for the nation? And I'm going to let you see what the reports talk about. Now here it talks about in Orange County, healthcare agencies is reaching out to all individuals who have had close contact with the sick individuals. LA County officials said they are doing the same. So, again, how did the Wuhan virus get into the nation? Okay, this is the part that they have not disclosed and they have not talked about. We just where we are. According to the CDC, symptoms of the novel coronavirus includes fever, cough, and shortness of breath. Okay, that's what they were specifying. Then the CDC recommends people avoid non-essential travel to Hubei province, China, including Wuhan. Okay, so all they saying is, again, don't go to, we better not go, no one to go to essential. So there's no purpose for you really being in there in those provinces, right? But I want to show you that, let me show you this here. No, is that the one? Okay, yeah, I think that's the one. Hold on, let me see, is that it? Okay, so let me show you this. This here was a proclamation on declaring a national emergency concerning the novel coronavirus disease. This was done on March 13th, okay? March 13th. Remember, they said they already had the first confirmed case in January 21st. They're almost a month late calling this out. So this had already been known within, let's say, the inside circle of the system. Let's put it that way, right? It was already known. So let me show you also that was mentioned in this, because this was the declaration made by Donald Trump. And then let me read to you what was said in this declaration. It said the spread of the COVID-19 within our nation and communities threatened to strain our national or nation's healthcare system. Listen to what they say. As of March 12, 2020, listen to the number. 1,645 people from 47 states have been infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. Okay, say that again. As of March 12, 2020, the number specified, 1,645 people from 47 states have been infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. It's incumbent on hospitals and medical facilities throughout the country to assess their preparedness posture and be prepared to surge capacity and capabilities. Additional measures, however, are needed to successfully contain and combat the virus in the United States. 1,645 people that they knew had it. And these were not probably civilians. They were probably people who were a part of the system. Okay? And so it goes down and says, now therefore I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, by the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including Section 201 and 301 of the National Emergency Act, 50 U.S.C. 1601, etc., okay, right? And consistent with the Section of 1135 of the Social Security Act and Amendment, do hereby find and proclaim that the COVID-19 outbreak in the United States constitutes a national emergency beginning March 1st, 2020. Now, wait a minute. It beginning on March 1st, 2020. Okay? When did we start doing social distancing? Right? When did that start? You have to ask yourself the question. When did the social distancing start? Okay, so now we see that how it's gotten pretty much throughout the country, right? And that came straight from the president making a proclamation document declaring this as a what's it, national outbreak, right? And so here, again, that was January 21st, right? That was out here. And what was this one here? Okay. And here again, I think I read that one. Okay, so there was 5,000 people, right? So, okay. And then I went here, right? We talked about that there. Those are the people from other nations. 36 cases outside of China. It was France, Singapore, Vietnam, Seoul, Korea, Nepal, Hong Kong, and Australia. So this is how this is becoming spread globally. It's due to the simple fact there's a lot of people who are participants in the systems of other nations or working and end up going back, right? So let's look at what they said, how they dealt with the situation. According to what these articles had put out. Now again, maybe y'all didn't see this. Now it says the screening process began before the evacuees boarded in China. So they screened them, okay? First, they were screened at the airport by the Chinese officials, or China officials, right? U.S. State Department physicians then conducted a second screening before joining the passengers for the marathon 21-hour flight to Anchorage. So here it is. So I guess where they just took the temperature. Do you feel fine? Okay. You're okay, right? So we're going to check you on before we get on the board. And then we're going to have the U.S. State Department physicians. They're going to also do a second screening on you. And then they're going to be on a plane, a 21-hour flight to, was it Anchorage, Ohio, Alaska? Okay, so they're on their way to Alaska from China. 21-hour flight. According to what it was written in this article, said one person in China had a fever, was not allowed to board the flight. Now, you know they can't say 100% nobody, so they had one and they left that person because they had a fever, right? So based on the way that it had been dealt with, now that we see what has happened according to what they state, maybe, well, I ain't gonna say no maybe. I'll talk about that as I get to that, right? So it says at Anchorage on Tuesday, the plane was met by the CDC quarantine team. So here you're talking about the United States State Department knew, CDC now knows, right? And that the CDC quarantine team that boarded the plane left the jet with the passengers, screened them once again for symptoms of fever and call. Now again, this is only 21 hours, right? From the time they boarded, the one you talk about that had a fever, you didn't let that one on, but everybody else who was on there who showed no signs and no symptoms of a fever or cough, right? They deemed them to be okay. Then it says health officials also questioned evacuees about whether they were exposed to the virus, right? They asking them questions, whether they were exposed to the virus, living with someone who was, and whether there was healthcare workers aboard who had been exposed. So remember, they said 5,000 people, but that number is even bigger than that because you're talking about healthcare workers, right? So you know there's a lot of people. And remember, those who've seen the video where I showed you the 2019 Hubei Wuhan military games, and it talked about 230,000 volunteers, right? Didn't specify whether those people who volunteer were from China or these are people who were from outside of China who were brought in to help set the stage for this. And so that was in October, right? October 19th through October the 27th. And I'm going to show you something that came out in the news. Let me show you something that I've seen that they're trying to, I guess they're going to try to deny this. I don't know what, maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe it's up here somewhere. But I've seen a report where it talks about that knowledge of the incident was already in November, right? But they're saying that that's a lie. They said that's not true. Matter of fact, let me see something here right quick. Let me see something. If I can find that right quick, because I think that's maybe this one here. Is that it? No, that's not it. That's not it. Not it. Oh, here it is right here. Okay, I got it. Okay. Let me show this. Hold on. All right, what's that about? Get out of here. Okay, so as you see on your screen there, it says defense officials say media reports about November coronavirus intel assessments are false. So they saying that there was reports that of November. Now, I told you also that I was listening to somebody who had a live show, and a nurse called in, and I think she was in Texas, maybe. And she said that they were having patients who had the coronavirus in November. That's what she said. I might be able to get the actual her verbatimly saying it so that you can hear, so that I didn't make this up. But again, they're stating that those official reports are false. So based on what we see and what's been known, what is we to believe? Because if they said that this is what took place, but you're showing something entirely different, are they going to tell the truth? Because again, we just seeing that now somehow that black people being the face of it. But we have to trace the history of it to find out how did it get in the hood. Right? We seen some people who they state that say they contracted it, but they show no symptoms. But the people, and according to the numbers that you're displaying, and the people dying seem to be people who come from a certain locale and geographic location in the United States specifically. At least that's the way you're reporting it. That's the way it seems like you're reporting it. All right, so let me go back, and I just want to present that to y'all, right? So let me show you this here. Hold on. Let's go back, right? So matter of fact, I can just show you that, right? Let me show you this. Remember that was the I don't do that. Hold on. All right, so remember that was the Military World Games, right? October 18th through the 27th, right? And that was for the Hubei, China Military World Game, right? And so, go back here. Okay, I think we did that one here, right? Yeah, we did that. Okay, we did that too. Okay, I don't know if I went there. Too early. Okay. Okay, went there, right? 20. Okay. And then, then also talk about no individuals indicated they were under high risk. So no individuals indicated they were under high risk. So again, they went under what they said, right? You asked them a question and they said. Now again, I'm not trying to ostracize anybody, because if you had been in that situation, I'm pretty sure you're scared. You don't know what's happening. You're trying to get back to your family, right? I get that. But the magnitude of what transpired, we have to now go back and look and see how this was handled. And the devastation that according to the reports are showing, and the lasting effects afterwards. That, you know, the saying is if white folks get a cold, black people are going to get pneumonia. In this case, black people are going to get the coronavirus, COVID-19. And the despair that has already been there is going to manifest 10-fold. You get what I'm saying? So we have to go back and we got to kind of look at this. So again, they're talking about the infection that is happening in China is a concern for everybody. To put this in context, coronavirus is spreading rapidly. We think in China. Wait a minute. What do you mean we think? What do you mean we think in China? Right? That we think. We think that it is appropriate that citizens who are in the epicenter of the outbreak in Wuhan are repatriated for their own safety. So here it is. They want to get them that are part of American citizens that are in the epicenter of the outbreak, which is in Wuhan, and to bring them home. Was that the best decision to make? Remove them one place, but where you bring them to and let's say quarantine them off is the difference between where we are now and where it could have been if the proper procedures would have been taken. So it says Brandon, who which I guess would be the person who was the head of the State Department. He said would not say where the State Department evacuees live. Now again, they talking about a lot of the people who are being evacuated are State Department people. These people who work for the system. Okay? Now, accordingly, what they write here, it says that wouldn't say where they live, but all are U.S. citizens, and the group included children from toddlers to teens. Well, that means those kids, those teenagers, did they end up going to school when they got back here, or did they just stay at home, right? We have to look at how this ended up spreading the way it did. There are family units coming back, Brandon said, okay? So it says passengers, mostly United States Department employees and their families, will be monitored at the air base for at least 72 hours. Now, let's say 72 hours. Here we are today talking about social distancing, and they're talking about at least get what? They want so many days. They want 2 weeks. Here you're saying 72 hours. Then they say, but the base is able to house for the entire 14-day incubation period. So, the question becomes, the people who they're stating who they're bringing back from the epicenter of the outbreak in the adjoining facilities and places that were also being affected, did they allow them to stay on those places of being quarantined for the 2 weeks? Is the question, right? And they're talking about here, this is Cameron Kaiser from the Riverside County Public Health Office. So you're going to find out as I go and I show some more of these reports where they took the evacuees, at least in that article, where they took them to. And then I'm going to show you what is being written today and how they're specifying how black people in this area end up getting it, right? This is, you have to put 2 and 2 together. So it says the group has been cordoned off from other areas of the base and are barred from contact with March personnel. Federal marshals have also been assigned to watch over them, right? Okay. And so let me go here. Now, this one was talking about in LA, a returning traveler from Wuhan. Okay. This person here seems like not to be classified as a state employee. Just was a random, right? Says in LA, authorities described the patient as a returning traveler from Wuhan City, China. The patient first received information about the virus while traveling through LAX on a previous trip, according to the LA County Department of Public Health. So here's an individual who seemed to be, on his own, he or she's own, traveling through LAX. So here's a person who had just came from ground zero, coming through a public airport around, let's say, January or something of that sort, right? And how many people did this individual come in contact, whether it was on the airport, whether it was on some public transportation, and let's just say the flight that the individual was on? What about the people on the flight? What about the contamination on the plane that continued to keep going with passengers even after that because there was no knowledge of it, right? So we got to see how this can just end up becoming engulfed the whole country, okay? But we see that the LA County Department of Health has knowledge of this, right? So we see that the institutions that are set up and what they do under this seems to, again, the public has no knowledge of what is taking place. Then it says last Wednesday, the patient passed through the airport again. Now, this will be the second time. The first time it did just was going through there because it had just came from where it came from and went on about its merry business, went on where it went to its destination and how many people it went from and ate and restaurants and friends and work and, You see how this is taking place? But then it says, then last Wednesday, the patient passed through the airport again with coronavirus symptoms and reported to the health officials. So here, now after the person had been there, it's now showing symptoms. So, but within a week's time, this person is showing symptoms. Because it says last Wednesday. So we're saying the Wednesday before is the one you're reporting originally. And then last Wednesday, this patient ended up coming back having symptoms. The person is currently receiving appropriate care at a local hospital. Now here, this individual is at a hospital with it. When it came in, do you understand? This time, nobody knows what this is, right? The hospital is dealing with it, but again, that does not mean if the individual is coughing, there's other people who are already in there sick, there's other people who might be visiting. There's a lot of differing factors when this is taking place. And so, accordingly, it says, in order to protect the patient's privacy and confidentiality, public health is not releasing the location. But we know this is in LA. But where in LA? Right? So the anonymity of not knowing, but they know. Okay? So where did they take them? We also heard Riverside, right? As the Air Force Base, right? Okay. So, what else do I got in here? Okay, I got, let's see. And I can freezing now. Huh? I'm not trying to do that. Stop that. Okay. So, it says there are a lot of concerns about this flight landing. Now, this is those who they're evacuating from Wuhan who are going to the Anchorage. It says people have reasonably asked why they're scared. You're scared? We understand that there's a lot about this virus that we don't know, but we are also have to keep in mind that these folks need to come home, right? So, yes, they're carriers. Yeah, there's a pandemic and they're scared of the unknown because you are now carrying something that the potential of you dying, right, is there. But the mindset is we're going to bring them home. They need to come home. And that's all that's need to be known is they need to come home, right? So Kaiser told the reporters we got a good perimeter out there to make sure the public and those individuals stay safe. Now here they saying, somebody's saying we got a good perimeter. These people have done their job. It's time for us to do ours. Now it says following the 3-day monitoring period in Southern California. 3-day monitoring period. 3 days? 3 days. Southern California. CDC officials will notify health officials in passengers' home state. So they allow them to go home. As originally they said about 5,000 people. I've seen even more. I've seen the numbers even bigger than that. So you had 21 hours on a plane. Then they say 72 hours. I say 3 days, which is the same thing as I guess it's 72 hours. And then allow them to get back and fly home. It says that who will continue to actually monitor their conditions for any changes from their homes. But they have already traversed across and came, you understand? We are going to monitor them for the full incubation period. If they want to go to their home state, then we will talk with health officials in those states and towns to continue to monitor their incubation. So, not that they were to be corned off and stay somewhere and monitor them from there. They allowed them to travel across the countries. Well, a lot of them, as you heard when Donald Trump wrote in the proclamation, 47 states, all 50 states, including District of Columbia. This is how it ended up getting in all the states, because you had over 5,000 people or more. According to what it said in that, right? So another one says, now here's some other parts to it. Says hundreds of American diplomatic workers and their families airlifted from China's coronavirus zone are being monitored for symptoms at Southern California military base. Okay. Hundreds of American diplomats, workers, and their families. Okay. Wednesday, as local and federal health officials sought to reassure the public the risk of the virus spread remains low. Federal health officials sought to reassure the public the risk of the virus spread remains low. How did they know? They did not know. They just assumed. And they told you about assuming. Then it says we think we can do a full evaluation in 3 days. You can do a full evaluation in 3 days. Christopher Braddon, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention Deputy Director, told reporters at a late morning news briefing in Riverside, saying the evacuees will ultimately be allowed to travel. No risk of the coronavirus has yet been detected, officials say, and the passengers are not under a federal quarantine. Huh? So how does this get where poor black folks at? Huh? Well, how does this get where poor black folks at? Is because poor black folks work at airports? Poor black folks is working for doing the grunt work at some of these places. Black folks had to be out there in a pandemic, had to work at regular pay. Now they want to come back and say, well, all those who had to work, that was working for essential place jobs, you can now get $25,000. Your job will apply for it, and then you can get the money. $25,000, that's how much your life was worth. And here were situations that you didn't even know. And if you had a choice, would you had? Right? So a lot of people who lost their lives, did they even know all this? Most likely not, right? Most likely not. Okay? So it says, however, a study by the Chinese researchers published in the Lancet Medical Journal claimed the first person to be diagnosed with the COVID-19 was on December 1st, 2019. A lot of earlier, and that person had no contact with the Hunan seafood wholesale market. Now here, they say December 1st. But when they tell you that it was happening December 31st, but here's somebody saying December 1st. Wu Wen-wan, a senior doctor at Wuhan Jinyintan Hospital and one of the authors of the study, told the BBC Chinese service that the patient was an elderly man who suffered from Alzheimer's disease. The patient lived 4 or 5 buses from the seafood market, and because he was sick, he basically didn't go out, Wu Wen-wan said. She also said that the 3 other people developed symptoms in the following days, 2 of whom had no exposure to Wuhan neither. So they saying, in a sense, they had nothing to do with that market. According to what they saying on here, they saying, one lived some buses away, but he was sick all the time, so he really didn't go. He didn't go in there. And they said the other people said they were nowhere near there. Okay. Now this one here talks about the plane with 201 people aboard was redirected from Ontario International. Now here's a plane that was trying to go into where? Ontario was what? Canada. Airport's 30 miles southeast of March Air Reserve Base in Riverside. The California flight inbound from Alaska, where a pilot stopped to refuel, was due to land at Ontario before authorities changed plans late Tuesday. Ontario Airport was like, you don't bring them here. No, don't you bring them here, right? The plane landed at March just after 8 a.m., local health officials. The evacuees were plucked from Wuhan, China, the megalopolis of 11 million people and center of the 2019 novel coronavirus that since claimed more than 100 lives, affected thousands more, and alert health officials worldwide. Okay. Do we know who patient 0 is in the COVID-19 corona outbreak that started in China? The short answer is no. They have, according to what they wrote there, I don't know where it is now, patient 0 means who was the original person that when they do all sifting through all the data, there's going to be that one person who's going to be the origin of where it began. And in China, they still have, according to this, at this present time, from what I got this information, there was no. So Chinese authorities originally reported that the first coronavirus case was on 31st of December, and many of the first cases of the pneumonia-like infections were immediately connected to a seafood and animal market in Wuhan in Hubei province, okay? That's where the story is beginning, okay? And then you had this here, said coronavirus may have originated in a lab linked to China's biowarfare program. That story is coming out January 26, 2020. What happened on January 20th, 26, 2020? That's the Kobe Bryant Day. That's the day that Kobe Bryant is being killed or died, depending on how you look at it, right? What is this? Then here you see that the Chinese officials blame coronavirus outbreak on the United States military. That's on March 12, 2020. The very next day is what? Donald Trump and them signing the declaration, national, right? Declaration, right? According to this, says no infections, pathogens, or disease-causing materials have been found outside authority areas at the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Disease. The CDC inspected the Military Research Institute in June, and inspectors found several areas of concern and standard operating procedure where are in place to protect workers and about. Now, this here is talking about the closing of this here. Let me show you this. This is what this is talking about. Fort Detrick lab shuts down after failed safety inspections. All research halted indefinitely. This story was done August 2nd, 2019. Fort Detrick. They closed down due to they had to go, as you see here, says the CDC sent a cease and desist order in July. After the United States MRBLOWSURMIND received the order from the CDC, its registration with the Federal Select Agent Program, which oversees disease-causing material use and possession, was suspended. The suspensions effectively halted all biological select agents and toxin research. Okay? There was an issue at Fort Detrick back in June. Okay? No, wait, I'm talking about back in, no, that's the wrong one. Back in, they say here, they showed this, the report that you see being taught is in August, but they say all the way back in July 2019. So when you seen that they stated this, right? Is it possible? Remember I showed you in the video that they showed, remember that there was a CBS report and they talked about the flu, and they talked about 9.7 million people were already infected with the flu, and that 4,800 people had already died. Where did that come from? And then from that, it ended like in January, it was going right into January, and then boom, we had the Wuhan. So do we know? But how did all this get into the black community is the question, right? So here was the reports in the United States evacuees from China coronavirus zone being monitored after landing in California. This was January 29th. You didn't hear nothing about that. You know why you don't hear nothing about that? Because people were dealing with the Kobe Bryant situation. Passengers boarded buses after arriving on the airplane. What? Buses? What buses? Was those buses still active even after that? What about the planes? Citizens being evacuated from Wuhan, China at March Air Reserve Base in Riverside, California, January 29th. You understand? Chinese government spokesperson has tried to blame the United States Army for the deadly coronavirus, which was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization this week. Chinese Foreign Minister spokesman Zhao Ziyang claimed Thursday that the United States military might have brought the COVID-19 virus to the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the outbreak emerged in December. When did patient zero begin in the United States? How many people are infected? What are the names of the hospital? It might be the United States Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. Be transparent, make public your data. U.S. owes us an explanation. Now, this was China saying to the United States. Okay, this is what was written. These are all the things that were written. Okay. Then you had, according to the Orange County officials, the patients there, a man in his 50s who arrived from Wuhan at LAX, is currently in isolation, local hospital in good condition. The county health care agency wouldn't say whether the man went through the CDC enhanced screening at LAX. He sought medical care once he arrived in Orange County. The man was provided guidance in order to reduce exposure to the public while awaiting laboratory confirmation from the CDC. What do you mean? See? The agency is following up with anyone who had close contact with the patient, said Orange County. Officials said there's no evidence of local transmission and current risk to the public remains low. Of course they're going to say that. Of course. Like I said before, everybody will use the term conspiracy theory and act as if like the word conspiracy don't exist and that you have never seen conspiracies in your life. Who's ever going to admit the fact that there was a conspiracy or a cover-up? No one. Okay? I'm not sure what that is. They the same? I think they're the same. Yeah, they're the same. Okay. All right. I think that might be all that I got on that, right? So, question becomes, right? The question becomes, if that's what took place, and the people who have been contracted with that, how did it get into the hoods of America? Are we to think that either we caught it because of working through the pandemic, or did we catch it because maybe people might have been housed amongst you and you didn't know, or we didn't know? I'm just hypotheticalizing the scenario because, again, something has to be accountable, because just saying that black people have an underlying health issues, okay, that's true. But how do you get the virus? Because you're already isolated. You're already around where people who got anything don't want to be around you. If you do work, you work in some of the most menial jobs. You're doing the grunt work. And even there's more grunt work than that even black people won't even do, right? So when you talk about servers, and right, being in service, serving, driving, doing the grunt work, now those jobs are for black folks. Just as I showed you, right? That they're talking about working at the hospital, right? Letting the people work at the hospital. So those are the things we have to look and ask ourselves. So when they start reporting those numbers and showing that, we get labeled and stigmatized with that. But you have to explain, based on the history that has been put out there through the articles, how does that get into where we at? Contact with other people that didn't know, and you know what I'm saying? So this is just like contagion, right? But then who's really to blame for this? I mean, we're not here to put a blame to say that we want to ostracize you, but all this loss that is coming and the loss that will be had with black people, I think $1,200 is not going to be enough, and $500 per child is not going to be enough. I think this is the perfect time, at least for black Americans, we as BADOS, it's time for y'all to go ahead and cut the check so that we can survive, because this here could have been avoided. if all the stuff that we're talking about now about flattening out and incubation, and if that would have been according to what you said in those articles, people were quarantined off, could have been stayed there. They were back already in the country, but to allow them to travel put everybody in a compromising situation. Well, a lot of people, according to your data and what you say, people lost their lives, and especially as black people. So I decided to trade back so we could see it. Check this out. All right, so that there was the story of news that I put together about how the coronavirus got in our hoods, right? Hopefully you understood the compilation and the pieces put together. But before I go ahead and end this, I want to talk about two other things real quick. Based on what you just seen there, and kind of like one of the underlying aspects to the theme of that, is the fact that somebody seems to be wanting to stigmatize black African Americans or black Americans. And so you see the different scenarios where you see white people gathering in bunches, police do nothing, prohibiting supposed to be of a funeral, but the Jewish people were out there, police did nothing. But you see black people out and they're getting arrested. You're even seeing police officers coming in the midst of people who are African Americans and coughing, right? Then I seen this story here, and it's talking about prosecutors charge a Florida man with biological weapon hoax over coronavirus threat, right? Say that again. Prosecutors charge Florida man with biological weapon hoax over coronavirus threat. As officers tried to restrain him, he told a female officer, "I have corona, bitch, and I'm spreading it around," according to court documents, right? And this is how this story reads. It was done April the 8th, 2020, coming from, it looks like NBC News, and it says federal prosecutors on Wednesday filed what are apparently the first charges of perpetrating a biological weapon hoax to arise out of the coronavirus pandemic. The prosecutors, let me go ahead, maybe let you see this. Let me go ahead. Can we go ahead and do that? So people can see it. Okay. Go back so you see that. You can see the story to that. Let me bring it back. Let me do this so that y'all can see the story. That way you can see it in so way I'm not just speaking, that it's not something that is real. You know, because sometimes some people, in order to believe something, they have to see it, right? Sometimes some people believe that if you're talking, if you don't show, you just talking. Maybe you just know, and then but you go inquisitive, go research. You know, some people, I can understand you don't trust what they say, but some people like that. So anyway, let me show you on the screen here. Again, as you see on your screen, about prosecutor charged Florida man with biological weapon hoax over coronavirus threat. Says federal prosecutors on Wednesday filed what are apparently the first charges of perpetrating a biological weapon hoax to arise out of the coronavirus pandemic. Prosecutors in Tampa charged James Jamal Curry, 31, of St. Petersburg, Florida, with coughing and spitting on police officers who were responding to domestic violence calls. Court documents say when he was arrested March 27, Curry said he was infected with the virus and coughed on the arms of one of the officers. Now, this is March 27. Really? Okay. But anyway, as officers tried to restrain him, he told a female officer, "I have corona, bitch, and I'm spreading it around," according to court documents. Curry was released on bond, but the police were called back to the house the next day and arrested him a second time. Charges say he spat on the arresting officer several times. Prosecutors said Curry tested negative for the virus and has shown no symptoms. Okay. So you see that brother right there. So again, ironically, he just got arrested. They said he was on calls for domestic violence, but then say that they were apprehending him based on that call. And looks like after they released him, they end up getting a call back. Now, again, did they call back or did they go back, right? So, again, just go to show you that, again, to stigmatize you, that you'll go down in the history when going back of a charge that they're going to use. They come a biological weapon hoax. But let me see something. Let me see if I could find where the police officer goes into a black area and is supposed to be coughing. Now, let me see if that video was out there. So I'm going to try to find it in real time. But before that, I want to give also some other news. I won't show it on the screen, but if you should, I'll tell you. It's from Newsweek. Was done April the 7th, 2020. And it's talking about essential workers will get up to $25,000 boost under Senate Democrat New Heroes Fund stimulus. Let me say that again. Essential workers will get up to $25,000 boost under Senate Democrats' New Heroes Fund stimulus. This is coming out of the Newsweek and reads like this. Senate Democrats unveiled a proposal Tuesday that would boost the pay of essential workers on the front line of the battle against the coronavirus pandemic by potentially tens of thousands of dollars. As much as $25,000 in hazard pay would be afforded over a period of time to those deemed essential, including employees in healthcare, drugstore, grocery store, sanitation workers, truck drivers, transportation workers, and all federal employees with frontline positions such as postal service workers. Not all heroes wear capes, Senator Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told reporters on the conference call Tuesday. For these Americans, working from home is not an option. Social distancing is not an option. The raise would be equivalent to $13 per hour and would apply retroactively from the start of the health crisis emergency on January 27th until the end of the year, Schumer said. Healthcare workers also could receive a one-time premium of up to $15,000 as part of a program to recruit and retain certain medical employees in fields experiencing shortages. The benefit would be applied retroactively for those already working on the front lines and to the families of healthcare workers who died as a result of the coronavirus. We are seeking these workers to take on great risk. They should be compensated for it, Schumer said. These Americans are the true heroes of this pandemic, and we need to make sure they are taken care of. They are there for us, so we must be there for them. Now, again, as I just did this video, and the theme is based on how did black folks get the coronavirus in their hood. You see that they came out with essential workers, what they call a Heroes Fund stimulus for, again, black people. Majority of our people, those, again, we're not talking about the ones who are, lettered, degreed, right, have their own business. We're talking about what they call the lumpen proletariats, the useless eaters, as they say. The ones who do the grunt work. And as it talked about in this article, it talks about those, again, as healthcare workers, drugstore, grocery store, sanitation, truck drivers, transportation, hotel work, all that. Those people whose jobs were deemed essential, that had to stay open, right? And a lot of our people work in this capacity of what you call a profession. So here it is that the job, a lot of people who work did not get hazarded pay. They got their normal pay, yet putting their life on the line. So now that a lot of them are going to either come back positive or becoming sick, to try to show some favor by throwing them $25,000 when, again, you already took $2 trillion out. So I guess this is to try to cover somewhat a little bit after you're going to only throw them $1,200 and maybe $500 for each kid. So it just go to show you that, again, what Michael Jackson say, all I want to say is that they don't really care about us, right? But let me see if I can find this part here where cop coughs at these, let's see if I can find. See if I can find this right quick, show this, and we'll get up out of here. It's been pretty long as it is. I'm trying to keep doing what I do. I don't see. Okay, I think I found it. Okay, so let me go ahead. Let me set it up. And let me set that up. And I think I found it here, right? I think I found it. And it looks like this is going to be in Baltimore, right? All right, so let me see if I can get this to go. Okay, it looks like I got that there. Get that here. And yeah, let me get this set up here. And then we will get this off and show this in, real time where I'm at right now. And as I was going to do out in the video, I just wanted to make sure I got this in there. So I want y'all to see this. And based on, remember the article I just read to you where a brother just went to jail for what they call biological hoax, right? Because he said he had it, right? So what happens when you do this? Is there any repercussions? Will you go to jail? Will you be held accountable for that as well? Let's see. All right, so it's a little drag in here. So let me go ahead. Pause that up. Oh, go back. All right, so let's go ahead and show this. You ready to show this? You ready? Let's see. We should be okay, right? And let's see. Is it going to work? Let's get it.
Baltimore police sergeant is under investigation after a video circulating. Baltimore police sergeant is under investigation after a video circulating on social media showed him coughing near residents. It happened at the Perkins homes in East Baltimore. A spokesperson with the Baltimore Police Department confirmed the incident, saying the department is aware of this and has viewed the video and believed it warranted being forwarded to the Public Integrity Bureau for an internal investigation. Commissioner Harrison says after watching the full video in its entirety, it is not only disturbing, but incomprehensible, especially considering the high level of strong and clear guidance that we have provided from the beginning regarding COVID-19.
Back, right? So you seen that with your own eyes, right? You seen a police officer, a sergeant, right? A sergeant coughing near the seem like black people, right? And you kind of just shied it off like it's kind of a joke. And you know, I seen videos where I seen white folks going around coughing, licking on like the train, so you put your hand on it because I guess they got it, and so they're gonna want to give it to you. So it's like there's a lot of shit going on out here, man. You know what I'm saying? And it's just what it is. You know, a lot of people out here, they're angry. As I told you, there's an underlying as to the reason why people want to deem us as being the poster for it, and also the fact that the census was about to come out, right? And you know, they keep telling us we 13% of the population, yet white folks is declining, right? So there's been a delay or suspension in the census. So by the time all this ends, I'm pretty sure we're going to be back to 12, maybe 11%. You understand? Not showing the fact that we probably are much bigger than that. And so with that being said, as I told you before, the phenomenon happened where black people, you know, has been trying to galvanize, talking about economics, self-sufficiency, own business, creating their own medias, and trying to be, and somebody said, no, we can't have that. And so we're hitting the reset button. Well, that's been this show for today, y'all. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, hit that like button, dislike button, subscribe, share. And again, we ready to hit that, sir? We ready to do that? Yeah, we got to go ahead and do it. Go ahead and hit it off. Let's go and hit it off so we can get up out of here. You ready to go? No, not yet. Not yet, huh? Okay, well, there we go. All right, there we go. All right, y'all. I want to thank each and every one of you for clicking on the video. Black Minds News, thank you kindly. Again, subscribe, share, like, dislike. Everything's good over here. We have EEOC. We don't block and we don't do none of that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion just as much as Black Minds entitled to what we display over here. So again, when you see your brother, greet your brother. What's good, brother? What's good, brother? When you see your sister, what's good, sister? What's good, brother? If you can't do that much, at least give the universal nod. Again, we're living in some difficult times right now. We have a nation of people, if not the entirety, who feel some kind of way. And now that something had been labeled from coming from somewhere else, and the stigmatization has been put off on them, and they cry foul that somebody is making names and talking about them. But what's going to happen now? That every time somebody is black, you're going to be labeled coronavirus. You're going to be labeled, oh, you got COVID-19. As you seen, the sergeant sat there and he coughed, making mockery. But I just read a story about a brother that was in Florida who you claim that you arrested twice, that accordingly, first time he told a woman and he had corona and trying to spread it. Second time you said he was constantly spitting on y'all. Well, again, this is Black Minds News. Till the next show, y'all, peace. peace, love, and to the next show, to the next show.